Motorsport games is a disaster, and they're ruining car racing video games for everyone. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than my usual sorts of videos, but I promise it's worth it. Over the past couple of months, Motorsport games has been having an absolute meltdown, and to be quite honest, I found it super interesting, both as a car fan and as a fan of business. And I know that sounds super nerdy, but trust me, I think you'll find it interesting too. Because if you've played any racing game out there, whether it be a Gran Turismo, a Forza, a Need for Speed, or an iRacing, or anything in between, this impacts you. And trust me, you're gonna find what I'm gonna talk about in today's video interesting, eye-opening. Let's jump into it. Before we jump into the absolute meltdown that is Motorsport games, what is Motorsport games? Well, this is Motorsport games. They are a video game developer and publisher who make a whole bunch of stuff, and chances are you might have actually played some of their games before, like any of the recent NASCAR games. NASCAR Rivals, NASCAR Heat, and NASCAR Ignition. All of those are Motorsport games titles. The same can also be said for R-Factor 2 and KartCraft and a bunch of the older NASCAR Heat games. That's actually not all Motorsport games owns, though. Motorsport games actually owns the licenses for all of these different racing series as well, like NASCAR, obviously, like you already saw their games, IndyCar, World Endurance Championship, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the BTCC, the British Touring Car Championship. Or well, I should say they did own the licenses for all of these racing series, because what we're going to talk about today sees the downfall of Motorsport games and the loss of all of these licenses and how they're going to have an effect on other racing games. Motorsport games has been making games for a little while now. They were actually founded back in 2018, but in 2021, January of 2021, they decided to have an IPO, an initial public offering. This is from January 12th of 2021 that basically says Motorsport Games was selling 3 million shares of the company at $20 per share. The main goal of a company having an IPO and opening the company up and actually becoming a public company is for them to gain outside investment from members of the public like you and I. Like, we could go in and buy shares of Motorsport Games and essentially give them our money and hope that they spend that money on things that are going to increase the stock price so we can make money. I know that's a very oversimplified way of explaining it, but that brings us to this, the stock chart of Motorsport Games. I know what you're saying. Nick, didn't you just say the IPO price was $20 per share during the first week? Yes, I did. And suddenly now they're $300 per share in the first week. I'll explain that in a second. It's interesting. All you need to know, though, for this portion of the video is $20 actually equals $300. During the second week, they drop a little bit down to $299. Third week, $301, doing a bit better. Fourth week, up to $326. So if you're Motorsport Games and you're suddenly now worth $600 million and you've got all of this cash on hand, what do you go and do with it? Well, like I said, you go and make investments, so hopefully your company is worth even more in the future. And that's exactly what Motorsport Games did. They actually went out and made some investments, and that's where all of these licenses come from. You can see, for example, in June of 2022, Motorsport Games announced a partnership with British Touring Car Championship to make the official BTCC game. Here's the website powered by Motorsport Games, coming in 2024. And BTCC wasn't the only exclusive license that Motorsport Games picked up. They also picked up the exclusive license for IndyCar and announced an IndyCar racing game coming to console and PC in 2023. And again, the exact same way as the BTCC game, you can also see their landing page here, like you can enter your thing and so on and so forth, and they kind of tell you about it. And all of these racing series, NASCAR, IndyCar, World Endurance Championship, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the British Touring Car Championship, they're all massive racing series, but all of them could do with a little bit more exposure to help grow their brand. And that's exactly what Motorsport Games allegedly promised them. Motorsport Games essentially went to all of these racing series and said, hey, we would like to buy an exclusive license for your racing series, and we will use that license to go in and make a racing game dedicated to your racing series. NASCAR was obviously one of the first ones they did with like the early NASCAR heats and ignitions and all of that sort of stuff. So when they went to an IndyCar, a World Endurance Champion, and a BTCC, they said, hey, look at what we did for NASCAR. We would love to do it for IndyCar and World Endurance Championship. and those guys are more inclined to sign on, and that's exactly what they did. You can actually see Motorsport Games boast about some of these licenses in this investor presentation. Like, that's where this graphic is from that I've been showing you. If you scroll down through it, you can actually see more information about their exclusive partnerships with some of these racing series. Like NASCAR, for example, that was their big one. They have the exclusive license to produce these games until 2030. What that means is no other racing game can have NASCAR in it using the names, the cars, the tracks, and so on, and call it NASCAR, because it's owned by Motorsport Games under this exclusive relationship. And I'm not gonna lie, I could probably make a 2 to 3 hour long video on why exclusive partnerships like this is just not really a good thing, but that's not what this video is about. Motorsport Games has raised all of this money, and with that money, they've gone out and they've purchased these exclusive licenses. But there was one problem, well, one major problem. Motorsport Games straight up doesn't have enough people working for them. Like right here, you can see number of employees in 2021, basically at their peak, they only had 189 people working for them. Just for reference, Turn 10 Studios, the people who make Forza Motorsport, they have around 300 to 400 employees working for Turn 10 themselves, and that doesn't even count all of like the third-party studios that actually help Turn 10 with all of the other things like the modeling and the CAD data and all of that sort of stuff, for example. Essentially, what I'm saying is it takes a huge amount of manpower to actually make these sort of games, and although 190 people is a lot of people, I don't think it's enough to actually kind of produce the games that Motorsport Games was really expecting. So although, yes, they did IPO at $300 and they did see some hype and some success throughout their first month, generally, since then, it's just been downhill from there. Having to pay for these licenses and having to pay for employees without any products actually coming out because they just don't have enough people to put anything out. Now, I know some of you guys might be saying, Nick, you keep saying Motorsport Games IPO'd at $300, but you showed us before it was actually $20. Both of those things are actually true because back in November of 2022, Motorsport Games had a reverse stock split. So for every 10 shares of the company you had, you actually only ended up with 1. Essentially, what Motorsport Games did is reduce the number of shares, but 10 times the price of them. A company usually has to do a reverse stock split when the share prices get super low because these companies can actually get like delisted from the stock exchange. You sometimes might hear people talking about that for FaZe, for example. We won't get into that either, though. Motorsport Games stock hasn't been doing well, and investors have been losing faith in the company. And we've actually been reporting about this over on the Twitter page for a little while. We tweeted this back in August: uncertain future for Motorsport Games beyond 2023 as they consider selling the NASCAR license. They actually lost $9 million since the start of 2023 and had less than $600,000 in cash in their account. Fast forward time, Motorsport Games did in fact sell the license for NASCAR to iRacing, of all people. iRacing actually came out and said in 2025 they're going to be launching their own NASCAR game for console, Nintendo Switch, and Steam. It actually came out on a recent investor call that Motorsport Games sold this NASCAR license to iRacing for $3.7 million, essentially giving Motorsport Games enough money to maybe make it to the end of the year. On the plus side, though, since iRacing now owns the NASCAR license and they've already announced that they're going to be making a dedicated NASCAR game for PC and for console, they're going to do a great job developing it. I can't wait to see what that ends up being. Not so fast, though, because Motorsport Games had more costs that they needed to cut if they wanted to survive the end of the year, because it also came out that every single month, Motorsport Games is currently burning $1.1 million. So even after selling that NASCAR license, they can only survive like 4 more months or so. So because of that, Motorsport Games actually laid off 40% of their staff. And that also wasn't good enough because they also lost the license for BTCC. This time, though, it was because of ongoing contract breaches. Allegedly, BTCC was supposed to get like monthly or quarterly payments from Motorsport Games, and Motorsport Games just stopped paying them. So BTCC went, nope, all right, we're just gonna take our license back, and you still owe us a bunch of money. They actually still owe them $400,000 left to BTCC. Already at this point, on November 6th at 7 a.m., Motorsport Games has lost the license for NASCAR, lost the license for BTCC. They've laid off 40% of their employees, and they also might be canceling the IndyCar game. A source from IndyCar actually told Insider Gaming, we haven't been shown anything new in months, and Motorsport Games is considering selling the IndyCar license. As it turns out, basically that 40% of the company that they laid off, a lot of those people were actually developing the upcoming IndyCar game. Hello, Nick from the future here. I actually recorded this video a couple of days ago with plans of uploading it today, thinking that nothing else could possibly go wrong for Motorsport Games between the time that I recorded it and the day I was planning on uploading it. Boy, was I wrong. Just yesterday, IndyCar actually filed like a motion paperwork, something along those lines. I'm not actually sure how these things happen, but IndyCar is essentially terminating their license agreement that they have with Motorsport Games. Allegedly, as the story goes, IndyCar had set forth like objectives that Motorsport Games had to hit to keep the license. Obviously, we don't exactly know what those objectives were since we don't get the license agreement. Usually for things like this, though, it's hitting like key development targets, like whether that be alphas or betas, sharing development progress with the licensee, and so on and so forth. And apparently, Motorsport Games didn't do that. And IndyCar also cited the recent layoffs as one of the other reasons that they're pulling the license away from Motorsport Games. So, they've now lost the IndyCar license as well, and they're not even able to sell it to somebody else to generate more money to keep Motorsport Games alive. And then if we fast forward time one last time, Motorsport Games had their quarterly earning call on November 7th, where they officially confirmed it. The IndyCar game development has been suspended, and Le Mans Ultimate also was delayed from the end of 2023 until February 20th of 2024. If you actually do the math based off what they've earned from selling the NASCAR license and the amount of money they're actually burning, they're going to run out of money basically right when Le Mans Ultimate is set to come out. So at the time of recording this video, we don't actually know if Le Mans Ultimate is gonna come out, because if Motorsport Games continues to just hemorrhage money and BTCC claims that $500,000 that they're owed, they might just run out of money and not be able to make it to the end of the month. And just another thing I had to mention in this video, this website, traction.gg, they were basically a Motorsport Games news website. They were actually owned by Motorsport Games, and Motorsport Games decided to fire the entire team of people who were working on this, which is really disappointing. They've already lost the license to BTCC, so another developer could actually go out there in theory and grab that license to make a dedicated game or make like an expansion or a DLC to an existing game. Regardless of what the option is, I hope somebody does something with it, because BTCC racing is just really cool, and I would love to try those cars and tracks and all of that stuff. And if rumors are true, Motorsport Games could also be losing the license to IndyCar. They've already paused development of the game. I doubt they're going to do anything with that license, so at the end of the day, I kind of just hope IndyCar walks in, again, another developer picks up that license and does something with it. I think the biggest takeaway from all of this, though, is racing series should seriously avoid exclusive agreements where they can, because as you've seen, sometimes it can go terribly wrong. And that leaves us here. Motorsport Games is a disaster, and they're ruining car racing video games for everybody. I don't think they'll survive another 6 months, but we'll see.